Hi friends, thank you so much for joining me back on the channel again today. So I have a fairly sizable book haul to share with you, and because I have so many books to share, I am going to split this video up into two sections. So in this section I have 20 books that I would like to share, and most of these were gifts from family for the winter solstice, but some of them I did buy for myself as well in the month of December. And most of these of course are spooky, so we have some horror and true crime and thrillers, but there are a couple of other genres dotted in around there as well. Before we get into the book haul, please make sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of my uploads. So jumping right on in here, the first book I have is Nightbooks by J.A. White, and when I read the synopsis of this, it reads very much like a middle grade sort of fairy tale. So here we follow a young boy named Alex who sneaks out in the middle of the night, and he gets captured by a witch who's named Natasha, and she holds him in a magical apartment that he can't escape from. And in the apartment there is also another captive, a little girl, and she tells Alex the only way out is by using the bone key which Natasha keeps on herself at all times. So Alex tries to get close to the witch by telling her stories every night, I would assume probably to lull her to sleep so he could get access to the key. But he is quickly running out of stories, running out of creativity, and running out of chances to escape. So this seems like a really fun adventure. I thought it was really intriguing. Like I said, it reads very much like a fairy tale, and it seems to be kind of in that middle grade range. So I think this one will be really fun. The next one up on our list is R.L. Stine's Nightmare Hour, and this is just a tiny little paperback, but this is apparently one of the books that the show R.L. Stine's Nightmare Hour is based off of, and I personally love the show. I've seen all of the episodes several times, so I think this is going to be really good. So just reading from the back here. The Nightmare Hour, the time when the lights fade, the real world slips into shadow, and the cold moonlit world of evil dreams takes over your mind. What horror awaits a boy who has to spend Halloween in a darkened hospital? How do you outwit a ghost who wants your skin? What makes Nightmare Inn the most frightening place to visit? In R.L. Stine's spine-tingling collection of stories that inspired the hit TV show R.L. Stine's Haunting Hour, best-selling author R.L. Stine spins a web of terror that will trap you in the world of nightmares. So, like I said, just a tiny little book, but I just love R.L. Stine's stories, so this is a little short story collection, and hopefully this lives up to the show because, like I said, I absolutely love the show. So next up we have Blood Sugar by Daniel Kraus, and the first thing that strikes me about this book is the cover. So it is very kind of pin-up, very Halloween. I just absolutely love the way that this looks. And this seems to be a little bit of Halloween crime. So this is centered around an outcast in town who wants to take revenge for all of the wrongs done in his life by filling Halloween candy with poison and needles and everything, and maiming and hurting children in the town. So right from there, you know, this sounds pretty sinister. And he also recruits 3 local boys who are also outcasts to help him kind of distribute all of this candy. But as it's getting close to dusk on Halloween Eve, will the boys go through with the plan or will they try to foil it? And it seems like this story is actually told from the point of view of one of the kids, and it just sounds really intriguing. I have heard about this book from some other booktubers, and I've heard some really good things. And honestly guys, I miss Halloween, and I have no problem with reading Halloween books throughout the year, obviously. So I think I'm going to be picking this one up pretty soon. So next up we have Ghost Road by Charis Cotter, and this author actually uprooted her family and moved to the little island of Newfoundland in eastern Canada because she absolutely fell in love with the storytelling there. And of course I'm from Newfoundland as well, so having a book that's a ghost story from my home province, I absolutely had to pick it up. I'm actually going to be selling this copy because I reached out to the author and I have a signed copy coming from her, which I'm really grateful for. But in this story we follow Ruth, who goes to Newfoundland to spend the summer with family instead of traveling with her dad. And there her cousin Ruby is also spending the summer as well, and together they figure out that they actually have a lot in common. So as the girls are exploring a cemetery one day, they find some ominous information on one of the headstones, and they actually find out that their family is cursed. And in every generation, a set of twins is born, but they are doomed to live short lives and will leave their children without mothers. And this is exactly what happened with Ruth and Ruby's mothers. They died very young. The other thing is that each set of twins has what they call the sight, and they can see a ghost road that leads to the mysterious town of Slipper's Cove, which holds all kinds of secrets. So the girls set out on a quest to learn more about their family, about the curse, and about Slipper's Cove, and this just sounds like such a cozy little ghost story, and I really hope that this author does justice to my home province, because it'll always hold a special place in my heart, and it's a really special place. So excited to get to this one for sure. So next up we have Ghost Story by Peter Straub, and I've heard some mixed reviews on this book, so I wanted to get into it myself and kind of just see which side of the fence that I come out on. So here takes place in a small town, and these four old men get together and tell each other frightening ghost stories. Some of them are real, some of them are fake, but every single one of them is terrifying. And it says here on the back, one story is coming back to haunt them and their small town. A tale of something they did long ago, a wicked mistake, a horrifying accident, and they are about to learn that no one can bury the past forever. So definitely intriguing. I have heard that it's a little bit slow, but like I said, I'm gonna make my own opinion on it. So next up we have The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson, and this is a coming-of-age story that takes place in 1980s Niagara Falls. And I have to say that right now I'm just all about the nostalgia from growing up in the 80s and 90s, so I'm really hoping that this one is kind of like what we experienced in my best friend's exorcism and has a lot of those cozy sort of memories that I grew up with. So this follows Jake Baker, who is very close with his uncle Calvin, who is a very eccentric man and is a lover of all things occult and conspiracy theories. And the summer that Jake turns 12, he befriends a pair of siblings in town, and Uncle Calvin initiates all of them into the Saturday Night Ghost Club. It starts out as a really kind of lighthearted little club, but they start uncovering things that they never could have imagined. So this seems like another very cozy sort of middle grade book. Really excited to get to this one. I have heard good things about this one as well. So next up we have How to Hang a Witch by Adriana Mather, and here we follow a young girl named Samantha, who is a new girl at school. She has just moved to Salem, Massachusetts, but her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was actually a witch hunter who put a lot of the witches that were accused back in the 17th century to death, and her past history is not making things easy for her when she arrives in town. So Samantha starts getting targeted at school by a group of girls who are called the Descendants, who are obviously the ancestors of the witches who were burned back in the 17th century, and things start to get very tense for Samantha. And on top of this, she actually finds out that there is a centuries-old curse, and she is left wondering if the ill-fated history of Salem is bound to repeat itself. So I love anything that has to do with Salem and the witch trials and anything like that, so really excited for this one. So next up we have Thornhill by Pam Smy, and I have to say that it was actually the cover of this book that really drew me into buying it. It is pretty thick, but it is full of tons and tons of illustrations throughout. So I'll just show you. So we have full page illustrations, and the text is fairly large as well. So this seems like a middle grade sort of book. So just reading from the back for you. A lonely girl in a new town, a ghostly figure in a window, a derelict old house, and a mystery spanning the decades. An orphan faces a bully alone and plots her revenge. Years later, a girl catches glimpses of the figure in a window of a burned out old abandoned house and begins to unravel the mystery of Thornhill. So again, seems like a really cozy sort of haunted house story. I am very much into that right now, it seems. And I think this one is going to be a nice little palate cleanser after reading something that's a little bit heavier. So next up we have The Whisper Man by Alex North, and in here we follow Tom Kennedy, who takes his son and moves to a new place for a fresh start after he loses his wife. But he actually finds out that the town has a very dark history, and that 20 years previous there was actually a serial killer that was called the Whisper Man, who abducted and killed 5 of the residents of the town before he was caught. So the MO of the killer was that he would stand outside of his victims' windows and lure them out by whispering to them. And just as Tom and his son are starting to settle into the town, a young boy goes missing, and the MO is almost exactly like what had happened 20 years previous. So now the residents are wondering, is there a copycat, or was the killer from 20 years ago working with an accomplice? So this seems to be very much like a spooky murder mystery, and just the killer's MO was definitely sending shivers down my spine, so this one sounds like it's going to be pretty good. So I got quite a few R.L. Stine in this haul, and this says that R.L. Stine picks his favorite scary stories. So this is kind of a short story collection of kind of the author's favorite stories, I guess maybe that he grew up with, and it sounded really intriguing to me, and I just absolutely love the cover. So excited to have this little one. So next we have The Daughters of Temperance Hobbs by Katherine Howe, and this is another sort of Salem witchcraft, witch trials sort of book. And here we follow Connie Goodwin, who is an expert in witchcraft and the Salem witch trials, but she is also a direct descendant of Deliverance Dane, who was one of the witches that was tried and put to death in Salem back in the 17th century. But unlike most of the people that were tried for witchcraft back in that day, Connie's bloodline is actually magical, and she discovers that she has a centuries-old curse that she is trying to figure out, and her fiance is actually in grave danger from this curse. So this has very practical magic kind of vibes to it. When I read the synopsis, I was like, oh, this seems to be, you know, right up the same sort of lines of that. So we'll see how this one goes. Next up is another booktube favorite, so it's The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, and I've heard such good things about this book. It is definitely a YouTube favorite. So this revolves around two parents and a little girl who go vacationing at a cabin kind of in the middle of nowhere, and one day these menacing strangers approach the little girl and give her a very ominous message. So I'll just read you from the inside here. None of what's going to happen is your fault. You haven't done anything wrong, but the three of you will have to make a tough decision. I wish with all my broken heart that you didn't have to. Your dads won't want to let us in, but they have to. We need your help to save the world, please. And from what I've heard of this book, it is very ominous, and this is kind of one of those where you have to make sort of a life or death decision, a very hard decision to either save your family or save humanity. So really intrigued by this one. I have high hopes for it. I'm really hoping it lives up to all the hype. The next one on our list is not a horror, but it will be a very good palate cleanser with all of the spooky reads that I have planned coming up, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama. So this, of course, is the former First Lady's biography, and I'm just really excited to read this. She is such an intriguing woman, and I definitely, I think, want to follow it up with Barack Obama's memoir that he just came out with, I believe, at the end of 2020. So, yeah, pretty self-explanatory. I've heard great things, and like I said, it'll be a really good palate cleanser just to get away from all of the spooky reads. And next up we have Highway of Tears by Jessica McDermaid. And this is a nonfiction book, a true crime book that centers around the problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls here in Canada. And it is absolutely a heartbreaking problem that we have right now. So I was excited to learn more, and if you've never heard of the Highway of Tears, it is a stretch of highway that goes through British Columbia on our west coast, and there have been multiple women who have gone missing and have been murdered along that stretch of highway. So just reading a little bit from the inside. For decades, Indigenous women and girls have gone missing or have been found murdered along an isolated stretch of highway in northwestern British Columbia. The corridor is known as the Highway of Tears, and it has come to symbolize a national crisis. So this is definitely something that I wanted to get to this year. It is a real problem that we have here, and I'm sure probably in other places in the world with missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I know it's going to be a heartbreaking story, but this is done by an investigative journalist, so I'm hoping it's going to be really good and that it does the cases justice. Next up we have Imaginary Friend by Chbosky, and this follows Kate Reese, who is on the run from an abusive relationship, and she takes herself and her son Christopher and runs away to a small knit community. And soon after they arrive, Christopher actually goes missing in the woods, but emerges 6 days later completely unharmed, but he he is totally different, and he now has the voice of an imaginary friend inside of his head, and this entity is telling him that he has to build a tree house or else the town will never be the same. So this sounds really, really good. I don't know if it has anything to do with like it being a possession story, but totally intrigued by this one. Next up we have just a little tiny book. It's called The Monster of Ellenhaven by Jennifer Giesbrecht, and hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And this sounds so intriguing, so I couldn't do a better synopsis than what's written on the inside here. The city of Elendhaven sulks on the edge of the ocean, racked by plague, abandoned by the south, stripped of industry and left to die. But nothing ever dies so easily. A thing without a name stalks the city, a thing shaped like a man, with a dark heart, long pale fingers yearning to wrap around throats, a monster who cannot die. So, tiny little book. It's just a little novella, about 150 pages, but it sounds so intriguing, and it's even blurbed here by Paul Tremblay, so excited to read this one. Should be able to finish it off in an afternoon. So next up I have a couple of anthologies. So I like to read short stories because just after reading, you know, really long stories and really long novels, it's nice just to go to, you know, a single story kind of each time you sit down, and everything is just tied up in a nice tidy little bow. I think you really have to be kind of one of those people that you either love short stories or you don't really care for them. Me personally, I love anthologies. So the first one is Haunted Nights by Ellen Datlow and Lisa Morton. And again, this is another Halloween anthology that I would like to get to before Halloween season. I did have it on my TBR from this past October, but I didn't get to it. And just on the back here, it says, award-winning editor Ellen Datlow and Halloween expert Lisa Morton's anthology of new fiction is inspired by the history, legends, and modern terror behind our favorite celebration. So I'm really hoping that this kind of lives up to all of those traditions of Samhain and Halloween and all of the legends and everything. Really excited to read this one. And the other one that I got is Hark, the Herald, Angels Scream, and this was edited by Christopher Golden, and it's also a Blumhouse. Both of these are Blumhouse books. And this one is centered around Christmas horror, obviously, so I will be saving this for kind of winter solstice time in 2021, so won't be getting to this anytime soon, but I had to nab it while I could and put it in my collection, and I'll read it next year. I have heard a little bit about this book from some other YouTubers, and it sounds like it's going to be really good, and I love reading kind of short spooky stories during the Christmas season. I know it's a very Victorian thing to do, and I absolutely love that era, so excited to get to this one during the holiday season this year. So next up we have Temptation by R.L. Stine, and this is actually a bind-up of 3 books. So we have Goodnight Kiss, Goodnight Kiss 2, and The Vampire Club, which came out in the 90s, and I was excited to get this one. I don't have those books yet in their original printings, but the story sounded so intriguing. I've been getting back into vampires lately, and this is a kind of vampire bind-up. So just reading from the back here. The vampires of Sandy Hollow crave the summer months. Summer means plenty of beach tourists and plenty of fresh blood after months of deprivation. But this year, the Eternal Ones have decided to spice things up with a little bet. The first to seduce a hot date from the human variety, and then turn them into a fellow creature of the night winds. The catch: in order to successfully turn their prey, they must only take 3 small sips of blood on 3 different nights. If they take too much blood at any night, the human will die and the bet will be lost. The setup sounds simple enough, but things get quickly complicated, especially when these vampires are just dying to quench their thirst. So, right up my alley. Like I said, I'm really getting back into vampires right now and excited to read this one. So the last book that I want to talk about in this section of the book haul is The Ritual by Adam Nevill, and I just finished No One Gets Out Alive by Adam Nevill, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed his writing style and just how he kind of portrays this sort of survival instinct that comes through in his writing. So this is another survival horror that takes place in the Scandinavian wilderness, where 4 university friends decide to go on a trip together and kind of reconnect and rekindle their friendship. But one of the members of the group realizes that he's very different from the rest now that they've been apart, and tensions start to rise. The group gets really, really lost in the Scandinavian wilderness. So in the wilderness, they come across a derelict building, and it contains strange objects, bones, and signs of a pagan ritual. And on top of this, they're actually being stalked by some sort of beast. So really excited to read this one. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed Adam Nevill's writing in No One Gets Out Alive, and I just know that this one is just going to be spooky and claustrophobic. I love those horror stories that take place in the woods where you're lost and you're disoriented and you can't get out. So that is everything I have for you so far for this book haul. Remember, this is part 1 of 2. I will be back in a few days with the second part of this haul. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're going to put any of these on your own TBR. But until next time, stay spooky, guys. Bye.